Dream machine. .com, H07, I-18 in the snap. We're building the future, never looking back.
Welcome back to Imaging Informatics Unplugged, where we try to simplify the complex in the ever-evolving world of imaging IT. Today we are joined by a leader and an educator who has been in imaging informatics since the beginning, and someone I consider a friend, Dr. Jay Crawford. For over 30 years, Jay has been at the front lines of medical imaging and informatics. He's been there for the rollout of MRI, digital subtraction angiography, and for some of the earliest PACS systems, not just using them, but validating them, implementing them, and, most relevant to this conversation, teaching others how to do it right. Jay is a certified imaging informatics professional, and he also holds a doctorate in health administration with a deep focus on informatics education and leadership. He's trained countless professionals, led PACS education efforts around the world. He's taught people from the US to hospitals in Malawi, and quite literally helped write the book on imaging informatics, contributing to the data storage chapter in the second edition of the Practical Imaging Informatics textbook, this book here. I highly recommend it. He helped launch the very first CIIP bootcamp, Certified Imaging Informatics Professional Bootcamp, with SIM in 2007. And he's continued to mentor the next generation of imaging professionals ever since. So what do we talk about in this episode? We cover why technical skills alone won't carry your career anymore and what will. We look at the danger of vendor over-reliance and how to maintain true domain expertise internally. We also take a look at why the PACS admin role is still misunderstood and how to fix that. And we examine what he's learned from teaching imaging professionals in drastically different environments, including his work in teaching imaging professionals in Malawi. Whether you're an imaging analyst, a PACS admin, a physician leader, or just someone who wants to level up in this space, Jay brings a very unique perspective, clarity, and wisdom that you won't find anywhere else. So with all that said, remember to like, subscribe, and let's jump into it. Welcome to another episode of Imaging Informatics Unplugged. And today we have Jay Crawford. And Jay is someone that I've interacted with for many years. I got to know Jay first we were both volunteering on the educational committee at SIM, the Society for Imaging Informatics and Medicine. And since then, Jay has gone on to do many training and knowledge transfer related tasks, and we've intersected in many different ways. So Jay, I'm looking forward to this conversation, and maybe to start things off, I'm just curious if you could share what got you into this world of, you've worn a lot of hats in imaging informatics. What's gotten you into the world of training and education within imaging informatics? Was there a particular moment or experience that kind of started you off in that direction?
I have to say, and thanks, it's great to be here, Jason. Before I begin, thank you for having me on the show. I think I have to go back to kind of even my undergraduate education and back to that point. My career early on has always been in introduction of new technologies or new things in medical imaging and radiology specifically. So early on, I was in the world of digital subtraction angiography, did tomosynthesis in the mid-80s before it was really a commonly used practice, worked in MRI as it was first introduced and got FDA approval here in the US. And as that kind of technical leader in learning things early, I wanted to share that knowledge with others, both as a personal motivation to share that knowledge and educate others on what I had learned, as well as kind of a job requirement. If I was a technical expert in that world, it was my responsibility to train others so that they could be technically proficient in that component also. That extended quite a lot. I realized that as a fundamental engineer, my undergraduate is biomedical engineer, that I lacked some of the skills that I needed to be really well-rounded, either manager or educator. So at some point in my career, I went back and filled those gaps with a master's and subsequently a doctorate in health administration, really with an emphasis on system management, information technology, and leadership. So that really introduced me to a lot of more fundamental educational aspects, more educational courses. How do adults learning theory and all that. So I was able to apply my motivation to teach others and to show others with a foundational background then, and it's really led me to help and train an awful lot of people.
And so you have trained people as a sim trainer. You're currently working at Rad Partners, and you have a training aspect there. But you have also performed training outside of North America, and you went to Malawi at one point, and you conducted a session on imaging informatics. Could you? First, I'd love to hear a little bit about the background of what led you to Malawi. How did that start? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about the differences in were there different approaches that you took when training in North America versus in Africa?
That is a great question. And I'll start with kind of how we got to that point. At that particular time, I was an imaging informaticist at the med school at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And UNC Chapel Hill has a global health relationship with a hospital in Lilongwe, Malawi, Kamuzu Central Hospital. So we would often send residents and dental students and faculty in all disciplines of healthcare back and forth as a global health elective. So we extended that to imaging. One of our radiologists, Katrina McGinty, took a strong interest in the imaging component. So she and I, primarily her, had applied for a RSNA Global Education Grant and received this grant to improve education in Malawi and its relationship with the education program at the University of North Carolina. Our goal was threefold. One, especially for Dr. McGinty, was to help the introduction of a residency program. Very large shortage of radiologists in the country, so they were just initiating a residency program. So Dr. McGinty went over there to educate and to establish the residency program, assist in establishing the residency program. I went over there to assess their current technical state and to provide some imaging informatics education to the selected staff in the hospital. We also brought a pediatric ultrasonographer with us. Ultrasound is still the primary diagnostic tool. And so she was able to improve the education and the quality of the ultrasounds that were performed at the hospital. So we had a threefold mission over there, all education-based, technologist, technical component, and physicians in training residents. It was a lot different. I had done a lot of, and you and I had done some of this work together, a lot of work in preparing individuals here in the U.S. for certification. I have a pretty good curriculum of the multidisciplinary kind of components that we talk about when we're preparing someone for CIIP certification as an imaging informatics professional, which covers a wide range of topics. And I quickly found when I went over there with those lectures, assuming that I would just kind of go through those sequentially, similar to the way I would do in the US. And about day two, I took all of those slides and all those papers and I just put them aside. And I got us all in the room and I just said, we're just going to talk. I think that there were two things that led to that. First of all, a lot of the information that we teach in North America in terms of certification are not applicable in LMICs. Certainly the financial components and even some of the project management, the organizational structure are not the same. So a large portion of that training was not applicable. Secondly, the foundational knowledge is so different that the premises that we would make if we were going to begin, the operational kind of premise that we would make as an assumption that is a baseline that everyone would know here in North America were not applicable there. And so, like I said, I took all of those kind of sequential knowledge modules, and it turned out better to just sit and listen. I really had to take a step back and listen to them and understand where they were coming from and the perspective of where these individuals were coming from. The 2 points I took away was, don't assume that there's any kind of starting point, and don't use this paradigm of what our organizational structure, our financial structure, any of the things that we almost take for granted are not applicable there. So I really had to kind of erase my mindset and start from scratch.
In Malawi, how long had the PACs been installed there for? Was it fairly new to them, or had they had digitization on imaging for a while?
Yeah, it was still a hybrid. They had it for a while, but the other component that takes some getting used to was downtime. Because no matter what equipment it was, there was no guarantee that anything was going to be working at any particular point in time. So their tolerance for adaptation was much greater. At the time I was there, they had a combination of digital radiography. There was one CT that was down about 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of their radiographic studies were plain film with a wet processor. So even though they had some digital radiography, there were no workstations. When we went to so most were read right off of the monitors. There was no diagnostic workstations or physician-based workstations whatsoever. Even for CT, usually the physician would go in and just look at it on the CT console. So especially with the inception of bringing on a residency class, there were 4 new residents in the class. They had nowhere to learn. They had nowhere to observe the images or do any interpretation whatsoever. So one of the first things we had to do before we really got to the education component was build a workstation. So,
wow. Yeah. You can really see how if you're going in with a curriculum specific to, where you've been teaching in the States, and then you bring that over, well, yeah, a lot of that's not going to be applicable. They don't have the access to the same workstations. They're reading off the console. Maybe they're using open source. When I went to Nepal, Osiris and other types of open source solutions, they had Macs thanks to the donations from RadAid and so on. But as far as a lot of open source tools, and it really changes the paradigm of how you're going to approach the ability of what a DICOM transfer means. There is no ability or as easy for it to do the setup prefetch and all these types of mechanisms. And, you talk about 50% downtime for CT. Imagine that happening on this side of the world. So it really does kind of give us a sense of gratitude of, things can be challenging over here, but we have it very good. And it's nice to be able to give back like that, like you were.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's a very eye-opening. I encourage any individual who has an interest in imaging informatics to explore international education implementation. I know, like you said, you have done that to Nepal, and myself to Malawi and other places. It's a great learning experience, as well as giving you an opportunity to contribute the knowledge that you may have gleaned to other parts of the world that may not be fortunate.
So you mentioned kind of getting back to some of the core areas where you are training, and maybe you're helping people prepare for CIIP, the Certified Imaging Informatics Professional designation. That's be an imaging informatics professional, or the whole domain of imaging informatics. It's very wide and varied. There's a lot of different areas that it touches on. I'm curious to see, when you approach a class, how do you balance handling the technical detail with also making sure that it's clinically relevant, it's going to be applicable to their day-to-day workflow and what they're going to be experiencing, and not miring them down in too much information overload when you've got so much opportunity of what to give them?
Yeah, that's really a trick. And I always try and sector it a little bit. Whenever especially if I'm teaching imaging informatics to a diverse group of students, I always try and level the playing field and make sure that, because we really, as imaging informatics evolves, or enterprise imaging informatics evolves, we end up with 2 very diverse sets of individuals that often come into this field. And that's the technologists who have this clinical background without the technical component, and the IT people who have been in server support or network support, who are coming into the imaging field from that side. And the overlap is very small in terms of knowledge base. The one group is very technical, the other group very clinical. So how do we teach one course for both of those individuals? And I think that my first effort is to try and make those two components understandable, at least at a communications level across, to make sure that the technologists understand enough of networking and servers that they don't have to know it, and they don't have to service it, and they don't have to fix it or troubleshoot it, but they do have to know enough to be conversational with those who do that. Likewise, and quite honestly, I think sometimes it's a bigger problem is for the technical people to understand the clinical ramifications of their actions in terms of, as you mentioned earlier, a prefetch, which may sound like a trivia point in terms of time for an IT person, whether it's 1 second or 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it's still pretty darn fast. But they need to understand the clinical ramifications and the multiplicative factor of something being slow or inaccessibility of images or data, relevant data that's necessary for the interpretation. So we have to strike a note with the technical people to understand really the downstream effect of the decisions that they make, the operational decisions that they make on their sides. They is kind of the corollary to the technologists being able to communicate with the technical people. The technical people need to understand the ramifications of their actions, their decisions, the build out of storage, et cetera. They have to be able to understand that that has a real downstream effect on clinical care.
I've seen it so many times where people that come in from pure IT backgrounds and enter into this world of, healthcare IT or imaging informatics, they lose the component of the fact that there's human beings and there's patient care, and it's a black box, and they're looking at it like it's a problem to solve, like they would if they were working for an internet service provider. Almost in some respects harder to train because it's not core facts. It's more the soft skills of understanding the impact clinically and the impact, what that means to actual patients downstream.
Yeah. So that's really the first point, is to try and, call it leveling the playing field, at least give a common vernacular that we can talk across both of those groups. The other components is really hard because, like you said, Jason, there's such a diverse. If we look at the test content outline of the CIIP, or look at these learning domains, there's project management, there's financial component, there's that IT, there's the clinical component, there are nomenclatures and lexicons and acronyms, and having a breadth of knowledge. And this is where both education and experience as an educator really are important, because it's hard to glean those. Even though books like Practical Imaging Informatics cover these domains, it really comes from experience. And it's difficult to have a trainer who understands finance, project management, IT, and clinical components. So to be a good educator, you really have to have a wealth of knowledge and a lot of experience, to my estimation, a lot of experience in the world of imaging informatics to be able to effectively communicate all of those domains to a diverse group of learners.
Absolutely. So let's continue down this path where we're helping people get certified. And I want to contrast that a little bit, because I find the path to designations, they're good for employers to be able to identify that, yes, you got this particular certificate. It proves you were dedicated, you studied, you took the exam, and you passed. I want to get your thoughts as we contrast that with the ability to train someone for their actual job. Because in many cases, those are two different things. I know many people that have a PMP designation that might not be the best project manager. And I know many people that are great project managers that don't have their PMP. And the same can be said for many different domains. I want to get your thoughts as an educator. What are your thoughts around the difference and how you approach those differences?
They're wildly different. I think your observation is a really good one. I see so many people who are in a role as a PACS administrator who are very kind of system specific and their knowledge is applicable to the current situation, but not transferable. And so I like to differentiate certainly between those job specific skills that are applicable for this scenario, in this application, in this hospital, in this workflow, versus the deeper understanding and how do we take them from the rote process of, if this happens, you click here, you look in this queue, you click right, and you hit the green arrow and it works. Well, that's a great skill, and that gets the stuck job out of the queue, but it does nothing for the understanding of what's really going on there. And as an educator, I much prefer to take that core specific, job specific knowledge and extend that into the transferable skill. So I like to talk about the why and what's happening beneath the clicking of the green arrow. So while it's necessary for the job function to get that job or get that report sent out, if that individual with that set of knowledge would go to another hospital or go to another facility, they would be starting at ground zero. So I think it's really, so it's really important to, as an educator, to take it beyond the buttonology, beyond the click the arrow, look in this spot, click on this, to a deeper understanding, and really to look at that knowledge from a system level, understand the interface, understand what's really going on, what's triggering these events, what's making that happen, why did it happen, as opposed to just it happened, now I fix it this way, because that's an endless cycle. Break fix is an endless cycle. We have to break that chain by understanding what the root cause was and what the trigger was. And that's really what I try and get people to understand.
Discovery of why. Otherwise, we're acting like AI agents, just kind of set out to do a specific task.
Yeah.
And
Very robotic. If your job is to simply look at this queue, and if it turns red, double click on it and retry, it's a very robotic. And like I said, it's not transferable. If all of a sudden I sent you across town to the other hospital, nothing that you knew at your place is applicable.
And I guess this leads me into my next question, where we start thinking about, those are, the more robotic it is, the more easy it is to replace those skills. You want to be able to think in a very reflective way about why we're doing something. And we see an introduction of real AI tools that are coming in and helping workflow, and also helping on the educational side. I was amazed. I did this for myself. I had to catch up on a webinar. I did not have time to watch this webinar. And I loaded it up in Notebook.LM, which is this Google tool, and it creates a podcast. And it was incredible. It was just, and I learned about the process. I took notes while I was in my daughter's dance class, watching her and listening to this podcast, instead of the traditional way of sitting and watching this webinar. I'm curious what your thoughts are about how these tools are going to affect what education is, and how people educate themselves and empower themselves moving forward.
That's a great point. I think there's a couple things to talk about here. First of all, it's very difficult to teach in today's society, to teach in the traditional classroom setting. Like, I'm going to give you an hour lecture on a particular topic. Attention spans. The world is moving too fast for that to be the primary component of education. So we really need to look at both quick bits of information. We're in this kind of TikTok world, in 5 minutes or 30-second bits of information. So we've got to change our thought process from a large volume dump of information from some expert into the receptive ears of the learners, to multimedia, small bits, like the buffet. Because of course people learn differently, but nobody really has the attention span or the time frame to sit there and listen to very long lectures about what may be kind of an esoteric subject a little bit. So AI plays a great role in that. Like you said, Notebook.LM is a way that we can record these, or let it synthesize podcast, listen to them in the car, listen to them on your phone. So really try and hit the end user in many different ways. Podcasts like this, AI generated information, whether that be a textual summary or audio summary, like you suggest, those can even be interactive, where you extract the salient information out of a manual or a document and actually interact. And just like you would ask it a question and let it extract that information instead of flipping through the manual to find it. So I like to do that. Short videos. Long videos have the same problem that a long didactic lecture is. I'm doing some training now. We've had some 30-second videos, just one small component. I just want to know how to do this one thing, watch the video. And really, that is a case where a picture is worth 1,000 words. It makes much more sense. So short blurbs, whether they're text verbs, email ticklers, reminders. We do have some of that long content, but even the long content, I'm breaking as much I can into shorter segments and introduce just a component. I was giving an hour or two on this one application that I was using. I've broken that into a fundamental component and then the more additional features component. So they have a chance to synthesize that knowledge and use these applications a little bit. They come back with better questions, and it definitely helps both on retention and acceptance of the additional information.
It's funny. I heard a stat that said Gen Z. It's hard. As a Canadian, I don't want to say Gen Z. Gen Z will 30% go to TikTok before looking at Google or anything like this. And it's again back to that short form content. If I'm looking for something, I don't want to watch an hour-long video. I want to watch a 30 to 60-second little clip. And in fact, this podcast, we're going to be breaking it up and we'll have little short segmented little mini videos. And it's a more digestible way where some people aren't going to listen to a full podcast, but at least they're going to get something out of these little microbites. And it's a new way of learning, definitely.
That's for sure.
So I want to thank you very much for taking the time. If you have any closing thoughts, I'll hand it over to you and we'll close out there.
Yeah, I would just say that the world of imaging informatics is so dynamic. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time and I learn every day. So I think it's really important that we all both share our knowledge with others, but also keep our ears open as a learner. So we all serve both as educators and learners, and it's the community that allows us all to be successful. So please keep your ears open as well as sharing the knowledge that you have obtained with others. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in Pittsburgh next year.
Sounds great. See you then.
HL7 IHE and Snap. We're building the future, never looking back.